Okay, welcome to part 4 of my library tour. This one will be shorter, I promise, although I guess you already know that because you can see how long the video is. This one's going to be kind of wacky because it's going to be covering, I guess, 4 different locations where I have books kind of randomly strewn about the house. And yeah, so we'll just go to the first bookshelf, though, is going to be this one here, as you can see. So a lot of these books I'm selling, actually, which I guess I'll cover. But I don't know, let's just hop into it, I guess. So there's some books, some music books, mixtape, the art of the cassette culture. Has nothing to do with comics. Here's oh, because I'm your dad. Oh, that's a picture book my son got me. So I have that in my collection. Bat Boy. So Pete Bagg is one of my favorite cartoonists ever. This is him doing Bat Boy comic strips from Weekly World News. Actually, Real American Brian, my brother, if you're watching this, remind me. I need to tell you about this book. I don't know if I've ever talked to you about this, but I know my brother was a huge fan of the Weekly World News magazine, newspaper, I guess, whatever you call it, from back in the day. Highbone Theater. This is a wacky, weird comic. I love weird comics. If you want to suggest any comics to me in the comments, the weirder the better, I think. But yeah, please give this video a thumbs up and comment and all that jazz. Subscribe if you haven't already. But this is Joe Daly. It's this like thick, little, tiny, mini comic size. I don't know. It's weird. I love it though. Mr. Wonderful by Daniel Klaus in this landscape size format. Wimbledon Green by Seth. Seth has came up a few times in earlier parts. This was like a sketchbook. I guess, well, it says right there, a story from the sketchbook of Seth. The world's greatest comic book collector in the world. So it's like a fictional story of Wimbledon Green. But I love Seth's artwork, his style, his kind of nuance and comedy. I really enjoy. Where the Sidewalk Ends. Every book collector needs that in their collection, right? Shel Silverstein. The Hypo. The Melancholy Young Lincoln. So Noah Van Sciver. I believe this is like his first major published work. It's by Fantagraphics. The Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist. This is one of the few comics I've managed to convince my wife to read. She's not a big comic book fan. But I love her dearly. But I managed to get her to read this, and she actually said she enjoyed it. She said it was really funny. The Book with No Pictures. This is another gift for my son by PJ Novak. Will Eisner, Comics and Sequential Art. You'll see strewn about in my collection too, like a lot of these how to make comics things, books, I guess. One day I'd like to make a comic book, but even if I don't, I like to learn the craft of making comics as much as possible. Red Rocket 7, this little tiny, I guess kind of CD album-sized trade paperback of Mike Allred's exploration through the history of music story. This is actually collected in volume 3 of the Madman library that you saw in part 2 of my library. So I actually don't know if I need to keep this, but this was also collected in album size, like vinyl record sized hardcover. But I think it's like long out of print. Survive 300 Million. This is a wacky mini comic by Paul Alessio. It's like post-apocalyptic Mad Max style comics that are like really trippy and like fluorescent colored and stuff. Really cool stuff. Noah Van Sciver's Joseph Smith and the Mormons. So Noah Van Sciver grew up as a Mormon. This is him doing a biography comic of Joseph Smith, and he plays it straight the whole time. There's no hysterics and no like glamorization or no bells and whistles to lean you any other way of thinking about Joseph Smith, which is an interesting way to approach a biography. Normally people will take kind of a sensationalist approach, but he played it straight the whole time, so it's kind of admirable in that regard. Jet Cat by Jay Stevens. This is an all ages comic that my son enjoyed as much as I did. This is from Black Eye. Is that the publishing company? Yeah, Black Eye, who's come back recently and been doing a lot of crowdfunders. American Barbarian. This is probably my favorite Tom Scioli comic. It's a barbarian comic, like you think like Conan or whatnot, but it's done with this Jack Kirby love letter art style that he has, and it's just so cool and wacky, and I love it. This is Muncible Threat. This is a zine from, shoot, what's the guy's name? I follow him on Instagram. He's like one of my favorite Instagram follows. I'm going to find out. Oh, Ken Landgraf did the artwork on the cover there. Bear with me. This is really hard to do with one hand. Okay. This is annoying. I don't know why I didn't put his name on the title. What's his name? Brad Dwyer. Thank you. Brad Dwyer. Great follow on Instagram. He has kind of a Kirby-esque art or inspiration to his art style too. Jake Smith, this Offbeat Town. Jake Smith, follow him on Instagram as well. He's a great cartoonist who's like on the up and up. He's a young kid. Oh, I say young kid. He might be, he looks young. But he does Blood Force Trauma as well, and that's being collected into a trade paperback soon. So give him a follow. This is David Aja and Ann Cinti's The Seeds. This is from Burger Books, like Karen Berger's imprint with Dark Horse. I talked about this already. This is volume 2 of the Urban Legends of TMNT. This is the years that they were with Image. Peculia by Richard Sala. Great cartoony horror. Reminds me a lot of like the Charles Addams of Addams Family fame. Joe Matt, Fair Weather, signed by author. That sticker was on there when I bought it. I bought this at a thrift store, I think. But Joe Matt signed it in 2007. Look at that cool Hulk poster he drew on the wall. Joe Matt's a great cartoonist. I think he's from Canada. But I love that book. That's a great book of growing up and warts and all, showing like even being a mean kid sometimes. This is Michael DeForge, who I talked about, I think, briefly at the end of last video, but he has a really cool art style where he, like some of the stuff's like normal human stuff, some of the stuff's like just mind-bendy, trippy stuff. But the story and the message is always really deep, and I love it. Miles Morales, The Ultimate End. That's like the first Miles Morales stories, I think. Hellphone. This was like a manga-inspired book by Benji Nate. It's like done in this tankobon style, but it's all color, and it's about this telephone that's terrorizing the town. It's kind of a wacky story, but I loved it, and I hope volume 2 comes out soon. Matter of Life by Jeffrey Brown, and 40 Ounce Collected by Jim Mahfood. And this is stuff I'm selling. I don't know if I should show this off in the video. Maybe as a relic of graveyard pasts of books that used to be in my collection. But there's the Final Crisis Omnibus, Gotham Central, which I loved, but I don't know. Sometimes with the decisions that there's JLA by Grant Morrison. Some of my decisions to sell these books, I'm just going to peek in there a little bit, is because I might have it in a different format. I might have upgraded to a different format. Might have not enjoyed it. Obviously, that'd be a reason to sell a book. Sometimes, though, with Gotham Central, I enjoyed it, but I just don't know if I'll be rereading it anytime soon. And sometimes I even get a little daring, and I'll sell a book in hopes that it'll be printed in a different format one day where I'll get to revisit it and re-enjoy it. So I'm sure I'll have stories of that, maybe, as this goes on. Then here's some Epic collections I'm selling. This Daredevil, this is volume 3. I'm selling this because it's going to be collected in the Silver Age Omnibus that's coming out soon, volume 2. At least part of it is, so I don't need that anymore. Doctor Strange, I decided to sell these Doctor Strange Epics because the Epic line, the lines I'm collecting are getting longer and taking up more shelf space, and something had to be cut. And unfortunately, it's Doctor Strange, so it's there. Flash Silver Age. I read this first volume and I absolutely loved it. So I'm trying to hunt down the 3 omnibuses of these. If you have a tip on where I can get those, let me know. Or maybe work out a trade for some of these if they're still on my shelf by the time you watch this video. But I want the 3 Silver Age omnibuses. Each volume here, like volume 1 and 2, is collects what's in that first volume omnibus. Volume 3 and 4 collects what's in the second volume. And then in these thick trade paperbacks, they never collected the material that's in the third volume. So I'm opting to get the omnibuses. I'm hunting those down. That's why I'm selling those. Mome. This is a sad one. This is a classic anthology from Fantagraphics Books. It ran 22 volumes. I have every volume here. I'm selling it mostly for shelf space, but there's such a great collection of early cartoonist work that I love now in these volumes. But I just read them, and I don't know if I'll revisit them, and I need shelf space, and I don't know. It's one I'm not so happy about selling, but they haven't been sold yet, so maybe I can change my mind one day. This last shelf over here, before we get to the other places in the house, Organisms from Ancient Cosmos, written and illustrated by S. Craig Zahler, who's a filmmaker, but did this story for Dark Horse. And he did all the artwork and lettering and everything. It's pretty ambitious. Copra by Michel Fife. I love this series. I had all 5 or 6 volumes of the trade paperbacks. But the minute this was announced, I sold those in anticipation to hopefully have the entire series in these master collections. These way oversized books. I absolutely love them. Copra is like Michel Fife's love letter to Ostrander's Suicide Squad series. Mini comics. This is a little tiny hardcover that collects a lot of mini comics. The reason I bought this initially was because it has, I don't know if I can flip to it. Rambo, oh yeah, I found it. Rambo 3.5 by Jim Rugg. Look at that. Flip right to it. Mini comic in here, which has never been, or is out of print. It's a mini comic that Jim did. That's the reason why I bought this. But then I've since loved a lot of the mini comics I found in here, and a lot of the cartoonists you see on the cover there. There's a volume 2 of that I should pick up, of this hardcover mini comic series. Rusty Brown by, I guess it's upside down, by Chris Ware. If you've read Chris Ware's Jimmy Corrigan, this is like the next great volume of comics that he did after that. Chris Ware's got an incredible design style. I need to do, one thing I want to do on my channel is creator spotlight videos where I show off like 3 different works from a particular creator and go more in depth of those creators. So Chris Ware is definitely going to get one of those videos, and you'll see more of that. The Passageway by Jeff Lemire and Andre Sorrentino. This is, I love Jeff Lemire and Andre Sorrentino as a team. Gideon Falls was like the big book they did, but they also did like Green Arrow together, Primordial, I think, and then I'm trying to think of anything else they did. Oh, they did a Wolverine run together, Old Man Logan, or Dead Man Logan? I don't know. But it was great, regardless. This is their horror universe they're creating for Image, called the Bone Orchard Mythos. This is the first volume that came out. It was a good first chapter, but it left me just wanting more, but like in kind of a bad way. Like I guess like it was good. I just wanted, like, I feel like this was just the tip of the iceberg. I need a thicker volume of this, so I might hold off on buying more of the Bone Orchard Mythos till it's collected in more volumes, I guess. I can read more at once, if you will. Cankor by Matthew Allison. This was a book that I thought on the surface was just like one of those cool art comics. That was like, you know, like kind of like a mindless story, if you will. But I read it and I was blown away by how riveting the story actually became. So I really like that. Sky Masters of the Space Force by Jack Kirby. This is an old Jack Kirby's newspaper strip with inking by Wally Wood. I did a video on this. It takes place before, or sorry, it doesn't take place before. It was done before Fantastic Four, so you can see a lot of the influences that Kirby would take into the Fantastic Four with that series. Dark Knight Returns, The Golden Child. This is not collected in the Master Race Absolute Edition that I showed off in part 2, but this is an oversized hardcover and it has Rafael Grampa artwork, which he hasn't done a lot of comics, but every time he does, they're magnificent. Alex Ross, Full Circle. This is Alex Ross's first foray into writing and drawing his own comics. He'd been working on this his whole life, and it kind of takes place after the This Man, This Monster story era of Fantastic Four, and it's just mind-blowingly good. If you're a fan of Alex Ross, you should definitely check that out. Jimbo. This has Gary Panter's Jimbo comics. You can see the by the style here, but Gary Panter did a lot of the artwork and set design for Pee-wee's Playhouse back in the day. But he's an underground cartoonist that I've since grown a fondness for. I love Pee-wee's Playhouse, and now I love his comics. Paul Pope. This is an art book by Paul Pope. I talked about that on part 3, how I became a fan of Paul Pope. Dynamite Diva. This is a comic by Jasper Jubinville. Like, he's only like 18 or 19-year-old kid. And he came out with this thick trade paperback last year that really kind of shook the core of like indie comics. Everyone's kind of blown away by it, and I think that kid's going places. A lot of cool, like that book itself is really great. I should do a video on it. Wizard Magazine this is issue 1. So I talked about on part 3 how I edited the second issue of this. I had nothing to do with this issue of Wizard Magazine. And it's Wizard. It's a love letter and homage to the Wizard magazine from back in the day for the 90s, but done by a lot of fans of the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel got together and they did their own cartooning work. So this is like chock full of like comics and interviews and lots of cool stuff. I should probably show these off on a video. Take a shot. I keep saying that. The Collected Jack Kirby Collector. So after Jack Kirby passed away, Tomorrow's Publishing was started doing this quarterly magazine, I think. It wasn't monthly, but called the Jack Kirby Collector. These are trade paperback collections of those issues. And they collect like original art by Jack Kirby, like scanned art, articles about him, different people that have written interviews with him, like just kind of like a historical document of Jack Kirby's life. And it's gone on, like volume 7 collects through issue 30, I think, but they're on like issue 80 something. But volume 7 was the last of the collected Jack Kirby Collector, which I'm kind of sad about. I'd like to collect it in this format, but obviously I'm missing volumes 4 and 5. So if anybody has a lead on those, let me know. Hotwire Comics Volume 1. This is the Glenhead anthology. I showed off volumes 2 and 3. So that's another one. I don't think he signed this one. I can't remember which one I had. I think I had volume 3, and then he signed volumes 2, or 1 and 2 for me. I can't remember. I don't know. I'll show them off in a video, though. Great stuff by Glenhead. I need to put that back in there. Okay, I'm just going to stick it there. Underwater Welder by Jeff Lemire. That's one of the early Jeff Lemire's I bought after Roughneck. I told that story on part 2. And it blew my mind. This is like a Twilight Zone episode done by Jeff Lemire. Like it reads like a Twilight Zone episode. It's really great. Steve Ditko's Charlton Heroes, Captain Atom, Blue Beetle, and Questions. So this collects all of Steve Ditko's works on those 3 characters in black and white by Gwendolyn Comics. Gwendolyn is a great publisher. They reprint a lot of the public domain stuff that's never been reprinted before. And they do it in black and white and color. I wish I got this version in color. Obviously, the black and white copies are cheaper. But I got this because this is like the precursor to Watchmen. Like Captain Atom was what Gibbons and Moore created to be Dr. Manhattan. Blue Beetle was what became Night Owl. And the Question is what became Rorschach. So I kind of read this as like I read Watchmen every year. It's like an annual tradition for me. And I try to read it in a different format or a different way to kind of really grasp the story in a different way. And last year I did it with reading this along with it to kind of read like the before Watchmen. You know, not the DC series before Watchmen, but my own before Watchmen. Like a Velvet Glove Cast in Iron. This is a Daniel Klaus story. This actually, I have a lot of his work, which I guess you'll see Ghost World here. That's already collected in the 8-ball box set that I have. But I also collected in those formats because it's like a different context reading it in the issues of 8-ball and also reading it all collected as a story. But I don't know. I'm weird. We Told You So. This is the coffee table biography of Fantagraphics books. Fantagraphics is my all-time favorite comics book publisher. So that was a must-read. Joe Daly. I talked about him earlier. This is Red Monkey and Double Happiness. Strange Death of Alex Raymond by Dave Sim and Carson Grubal. This is like the newest addition to my library. Just picked this up like last week. It's from Living the Line. It's a brand new publisher that Carson Grubal and I always forget the other gentleman's name. But they have together that they've only produced like 4 or 5 comics, so it's a really small publisher. They're really precious with what they do reprint, but this is like the first one. This is Dave Sim of like Cerebus fame. Started this series, and then he had like a hand or wrist issue, and Carson Grubal had to finish it. But it's telling the story of Alex Raymond and kind of a history of those early comic strips along with it. I can't wait to read it though. Like I said, it's a new edition, so I haven't read it yet. Wilson by Daniel Klaus and Ghost World. This is the special edition hardcover that also includes like the script and stuff of the movies and behind the scenes kind of nonsense. Creepy presents Steve Ditko. This collects all of Steve Ditko's work with Creepy Magazine. Creepy and Eerie Magazine, Dark Horse, I missed out on all the great oversized hardcovers of those that they released, the archives where they collected every single issue. But they're reprinting those in paperback, and I'll be collecting those, and I'm pretty excited about that. There's the Holy Bible. Here is a weird book. So Fletcher Hanks was a Golden Age cartoonist that had a really tragic story in life, and he didn't treat people the best way, but he was also very inventive and had a really bizarre, dark way of thinking. But Golden Age comics at their weirdest is what this book is. But it's called Turn Loose Our Death Rays and Kill Them All. Berserk, Volume 1. This is the Volume 1 of the manga. It's actually a gift from Omar of Near My Condition, who I do social media for. But like all my new manga rules, I buy one volume or read one volume, and if I like it, I'll keep going. I read the first tankobon of Berserk years back, and I really enjoyed it. So much so that I was always planning to move on to these deluxe editions by Dark Horse, but there's 13 of them, and the shelf space always intimidated me. But now that Omar gifted me this first volume, I'm going to read it, and then I'll keep buying volumes as long as it keeps interesting me. The old manga rule. Moon Shadow by J.M. DeMatteis and John J. Muth. This is one of the earlier painted comics. And J.M. DeMatteis is a writer that I've grown a fondness for. Flash by Grant Morrison. This is an always find. I love the Flash character, and this is Grant Morrison's short run on the character. Blubber by Gilbert Hernandez. This book is weird. I cannot describe it in any other fashion, and you can see it's adults only, despite if it's Gilbert Hernandez, I think exploring all the weird whims of his brain while he does Love and Rockets comics. Best American Comics, Charles Burns, the editor of that issue. This is the Complete Matinee Junkie. I bought this while I was in New York. It's Jordan Jeffries doing an autobio comic while he's exploring all the movies. Well, in real time as he sees all the movies that he sees. But you see like his relationships with his friends and stuff and how that's affected by everything. It's really interesting. I liked it. Noah Van Sciver as a cartoonist. This was a spectacular book that came out last year. I really enjoyed it. Noah Van Sciver is one of my favorite cartoonists today that does a lot of autobio comics. And this one in itself was really amazing. I'd recommend this. If you want to try out Noah Van Sciver, this would be a good place to start. And then Scoop Scuttle and his pals. This is Basil Wolverton doing like more comedic comics. And I really enjoyed this. They're like newspaper strips. And just like his cartooning alone is just really fun to read. But that's all for this shelf. Let me move on to the next shelf that we will see in this weird part 4. Okay, so these are some shelves we have on either side of the TV. It's also March Madness. UConn just won the championship. Congratulations. But we always fill out our brackets. That's what that is. That won't be on the wall permanently, I promise. But, so we have these shelves on either side of the TV, and my wife had this idea to do like a rainbow, starting with like red on this side, all the way to yellow, I guess. I'm colorblind. Fun fact. Um, and then the other side has the rest of the Roy G. Biv rainbow on the other side of spine colors. It's just like a design idea she has, and she wants to fill up the whole shelf, I think, with the rainbow. So she borrowed books from my library that has those colors and those spines, and I said, sure. I love having books everywhere in every room of the house, really, to just have on hand to be able to read and to show off and that kind of thing. So I obliged, of course, and also it frees up shelf space in the library, so how could I not? But let's go through these. We have a flower there. This is a Sharpie Revolution. This is a book about mini comics and DIY zines. So it's a little tiny mini comic in itself. Fred the Clown, I talked about on part 3, the Muppets. I think I need to do this way. The Muppets Omnibus. This is Roger Langridge's early work, Fred the Clown, that I loved. And then we have Super Sentai Go Ranger. This is a manga. If you love Power Rangers, you'll love this. This is Shitaro Ishinomori. Some of his early work. He is one of the mangaka that have gotten close to like the Osamu Tezuka amount of pages that he's done with manga. But it has a lot of his work has not been collected in English, so I'm hoping that this starts a trend. This just came out like last year from Seven Seas. I read this actually this past weekend, and it left a lot to be desired. I love a lot of the character designs. I love Shinomori's cartooning, but it felt like a first chapter of what should be a longer series. So just as I was falling in love with the characters, it ended, and I don't think the series ever continued. So it was kind of disappointing in a good way. Like it wasn't bad. I wanted more. Black Hole by Charles Burns. This is my all-time favorite horror comic. This book is, wow. It's like surrealist horror at its finest. And Charles Burns is an amazing cartoonist. If you're wanting a horror comic that is like different than any other horror comic you'll read, try this out. The Realist by, it's gonna be kind of hard, Asaf Hanaka. I'm probably saying his name wrong. I'm sorry, Asaf or Mr. The Realist. I'm sorry for butchering your name. But these are like one-page comic strips that were collected on the web, but they're being that were being presented on the web and now being collected in these hardcovers. I love this first volume that I read. There are 2 other volumes that I need to pick up. King City by Brandon Graham. This is a great gateway comic. Brandon Graham is an awesome cartoonist that has like a Mobius style to him. And if you're looking for a gateway comic to get people into comic books that's not like a Capes and Cowls type deal, I would recommend King City. There's a good example of the artwork. It's just really a fun and weird and wacky kind of different book that you can recommend to your friends that you want to get into comics. Let me organize this into the way my wife had it. Okay. So I did The Realist. Oh, The Realist is supposed... Okay, I'll fix that later. Dementia 21. This is a manga from Keigo. But this is, if you're, again, surrealist horror. I think it's kind of like my new favorite way of horror, like bizarre surrealist stuff. This is volume 2. Volume 1 has a different colored spine, so I think it's on the other side, which you'll get to. You'll see in a little bit. Samurai Slasher Omnibus. This was a Kickstarter anthology, all written by Mike Garley, but he had different artists do each story. Street Angel by Jim Rugg. A homeless teenager on a skateboard, I think is the way he... Homeless teenage ninja on a skateboard is the way he describes this. That's exactly what it is. It's fun comics, and Jim Rugg is an incredible cartoonist. Girl Scouts. We saw some other volumes of Girl Scouts by Jim Lawfoot on an earlier part. So that's volume 2. Wonder 3. This is a Osamu Tezuka book. It's really thick. Agent 9. That's one of my son's books, or comic books. Rufus Marigold. This is a great workplace comedy, dramedy, I guess, by Ross Murphy. This was on Kickstarter that I picked up. Youth is Wasted by Noah Van Sciver. I picked this up on a trip to Chicago with my brother recently. Mercy Watson, that's my son's. Acme Novelty Date Book. This is by Chris Ware. It's like a sketchbook that he has. Bob's Burgers cookbook. 8 Ball, the collected 8 Ball. This is the trade paperback version of the box set that I have. And I have that because Organic Price Books sent it to me for a review copy to do a comparison. So I did that. Rich Tommaso. I talked about him on... He did Black Phoenix, that hardcover in part 1, I believe, of the library tour. This is his earlier works, The Horror of Collier County. It's also surrealist horror, so that's kind of like the theme of the shelf, I guess. Kill the Minotaur. I've not read this. This was also gifted to me from someone I bought books from, kind of threw it in there. Wanted, Beavis and Butthead. So these are early Marvel comics from Beavis and Butthead. Rick Parker did some great cartooning in these. I kind of wish there was an omnibus of this because beyond just the Beavis and Butthead stuff, like the panels and stuff are just chock full of like jokes that you would miss if you were just kind of breezing through and reading it. It's fun comics though. This is okay, lost view there. Number 5, volume 4 by Taiyo Matsumoto. I think all 4 volumes are strewn about throughout this rainbow theme we have going on here. But that's volume 4. That's great, Taiyo Matsumoto. That's the first series of his that I was able to collect as it was coming out. Like, he did that series years ago, but it was just being recently reprinted in these Viz signature oversized editions. So I was collecting it as it came out. It's kind of fun. This is Seeds and Stems by, it's in the Mega Mog book. Collecting a lot of the mini comics from Simon Hanselman. Some of these books, like this one, my wife just bought. She originally was buying books from a thrift store of these colors to do the rainbow thing. So these are some of these random books that none of us have ever read, but they're just in here for the color effect, I guess. Oz, complete collection. This is my son's, but I want to point it out because we both love this series so much. Scotty Young on the artwork, Eric Schoenauer on writing, and it goes through all of Frank Elbaum's Wizard of Oz stories, which is great. A little book for fathers. My son bought this for me in New York while we were there. He's so sweet. Another Peter Bagg book. This one's about Zora Neale Hurston. The Beats. This is early Ed Piskor artwork with Harvey Pekar writing. Orphan and the Five Beasts. James Stokoe, I've talked about him and how he's one of my favorite cartoonists going today. This is his newer series, and it's really, really great, especially if you like samurai comics. Space Knights by Kevin Anthony Catalan. He's an upcoming cartoonist. Check this out. He needs to be read by all. His artwork is insane. And then Message to Adolf. This is Osamu Tezuka's manga. It's 2 volumes. Volume 1 is over there on the other side of the rainbow, as I have now been calling it. It's a story of where 3 different characters with the name Adolf and their lives and how they go through their lives and interact, and one of them is Adolf Hitler. This is Bomba by Osamu Tezuka. Some more Tezuka. I didn't realize I have so much Tezuka. That's good. And then these are 2 other random books along with that. But this is Meisana Koku, Volume 4, which we'll talk more about when we get to the other side of the rainbow. All right, we made it to the other side of the rainbow. So as you can see on this side of the rainbow, we have the rest of the Roy G. Biv thing here. Up top, we have Please Don't Step on My Jinko Jeans by Noah Van Sciver. Some more autobio comics of him as a kid. If you're a kid of the 90s, you know what Jinko Jeans are. And more great Noah Van Sciver comics. Mars Attacks. This little book is awesome. It collects every one of the Mars Attacks like cards from back in the day. And they each get like a full page, front and back. That's not a good page. Okay. They each get like a page front and back of what they were, little anecdotes about them and whatnot. And it even collects some of the cards back there. And then the dust jacket is actually like the cheap vellum or whatever material those comics came in or whatever. So if you're a fan of like the Mars Attacks original cards, I recommend that. Number 5, Volume 3 by Taiyo Matsumoto. Clockwork Apple by Osamu Tezuka. And then Dementia 21, which is the first volume of that series by Keigo. Kamen Rider. So this is more Shitaro Ishinomori comics. This one is much thicker than the Super Sentai Go Ranger, Power Rangers one. So I'm hoping there's more to this one, more meat to it that I'll enjoy. I haven't read this one yet, but I love tokusatsu. Shout out to my friend Connor Craig from Connor Craig. I probably said his name wrong. I'm sorry, Connor. From Scotland. He's a up-and-coming comic book writer, and he's a big tokusatsu fan too. Much bigger than me, so he's usually my go-to guru of that genre. But I need to read that still. That's just Adolf Volume 1 by Osamu Tezuka. The Dejects from J. Stevens. A lot of his comics you've seen in other earlier parts. Peter Bag's Sweatshop. This is like what it's like to work as a cartoonist. And it's called Sweatshop because it's like, it takes comic books to like a manufacturing level. Like they're just like a factory of comics that they pump out for like the big two. It's kind of a satirical take on the comic book industry that I love. Essex County. I gotta pull this one off the shelf because I bought this. I don't know if I can show this off. Bought this from Half Price Books when I was in my Jeff Lemire phase. Well, I'm still in a Jeff Lemire phase. That'll never stop. But early on in the phase, and I'm trying to show this off. One hand, it's kind of hard. Here we go. And it was signed. So I bought that from like a Half Price Books, and it came signed. I don't know why somebody would sell that on Half Price Book. Not that it's like worth millions of dollars or anything, but like, I don't know. You met Jeff Lemire and you had him sign it, and then he sold his book. But hey, I reaped the benefits. Jack Kirby Superpowers. This is a trade paperback I bought for cheap from Ollie's. This stuff is collected in the Bronze Age omnibus that I have. I just bought it to... Sometimes I like to have like paperbacks on the go that I can throw in my backpack and hit the road, if you will. Or pass them down to my son too. That omnibus isn't really conducive for traveling, so whatever. Dressing by Michael DeForge. More great Michael DeForge comics. Credo, the Rose Wilder Lane story from Peter Bag. Familiar Face by Michael DeForge. More weird comics from DeForge that I love. Super Spy from Matt Kent. I need to upgrade this to the hardcover because it includes the other part of the story, and it's oversized. But Matt Kent doing spies, you can never go wrong with that. That's a random book, I think, that my wife bought to make the rainbow. Tai Matsumoto's number 5, volume 1. Some more random books. Mercy Watson, Drew and Jot, Tiny Titans. These three are my son's books. Howard Chaykin's American Flag. A great series from the early 80s that once you read it, you'll see how influential this was on things like The Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen. But it was Howard Chaykin doing this. And Howard Chaykin actually shared a studio with Frank Miller and Walt Simonson. I think those two, yeah. So Frank Miller was working on Daredevil, Walt Simonson was working on Thor, and Howard Chaykin was working on American Flag. All three at the same time in the same studio. That always amazes me. Redemption by Rick Veitch. He's one of my favorite cartoonists from the Kubert School. I talked about his comics earlier. I think in part 1. Yeah! With cartooning by Gilbert Hernandez, writing by Pete Bagg. Superman 78. This is a newer book by Robert Venditti and Wilfredo Torres and Jordi Belair on coloring. This is a continuation of the classic 70s Superman movies. I believe this takes place after Superman 2. Reset by Peter Bagg. This is a great... Peter Bagg does a lot of like... I don't even want to call them slice of life, but like comedy comics that are real life, I guess. That don't really involve a lot of science fiction and whatnot. This was a little science fiction-y, though. It still has a lot of more human aspects to it, but it's kind of like a reset if you can go back in your life and revisit things and redo things and what would happen. Snails, I think it's my son's book. Neon Genesis Evangelion. So this is a recommendation from, again, Connor, the tokusatsu guru that I mentioned earlier. He loves this anime and says like he swears that it's like one of the greatest things he's ever consumed, I guess, in story wise. So I bought the manga because him and I have a joke that I'm like, it was like, he loves movies and stuff too. And I'm like, is there a comic book version? Because I'd rather just read the comic. But he swears I need to read watch the anime first. So I bought this first volume that collects the first 3 volumes, and I don't know. We'll see how that goes. And then I have Saved by the Bell and Rugrats. These were 2 kind of gateway comics that my wife bought to see if she would get into them. She liked them. She enjoyed them. Mason Ikoku Volume 5. So I had Volume 4 earlier, and then here's Volume 5. These were also gifts from Omar from Near My Condition. This is one of his all-time favorite series. It's like a love romance story manga from Rumiko Takahashi. But so he gifted me Volume 4 and 5. I still need to find Volumes 1 through 3 to start the series, though. And then we have Taiyo Matsumoto's Volume 2 of number 5. If I can pull that down. Doop. And then a couple random books here. Death in the Family, though. That's it's not the Batman comic. It's just a random book that has the same title, apparently. And then Acme Novelty Date Book, Volume 2 of the Chris Ware sketchbooks. And then we'll move on to the final shelf. Okay, this is the last section of my library. This is just the bookshelf I have next to my bed for books that I'm currently reading. And you'll see a hodgepodge here. Just one quick note, I am always constantly reading like 10 different books at once with lots of bookmarks. I know this kind of sounds crazy to some people, that usually a lot of people like to only read one book at a time and power through it and then move on to the next one. I'm always reading based on my mood. So if I'm in the mood for something lighthearted, I go for that. Something more horror-based or war comics or what have you. So always reading a lot at one time. But here we have JLA Tower of Babel by Mark Waid. The Terminator hardcover. This matches the Aliens and Predator hardcovers that you saw on the previous shelf. Hellboy Library Volume 1. I'm doing a Hellboy read-through, and I am working my way through that. Devil Dinosaur Omnibus. This is like the thinnest omnibus Marvel has, even to the point where they had to flip the title banner there for Omnibus. It's only 9 issues, but it's the classic Jack Kirby run from the 70s. Here's a Charles Burns book, Big Baby. I found this for an incredible deal at Half Price Books. This is like way out of print, kind of hard to find. Also found this at Half Price Books. Oh, it's upside down. This is a Gwendolyn book of Sparky Watts, Volume 2. It's like a Golden Age comedic superhero comic. It's been a lot of fun. I've been reading that. Gwendolyn, though, they do, I don't know if I mentioned this before, they do a lot of out of print, or sorry, not out of print, public domain comics. Comics that are now into the public domain to where anybody can print them. And they print them in these like thick paperbacks and stuff, so really affordable way to read some older comics. Then I have my Tintin collection. I don't have every Tintin album, but I'll show you the ones I have now. These are here because my son and I are currently reading through all of the Tintin books. I think I'm missing about 9 or 10 of them to have a complete set. But so far it's been a lot of fun. He's been enjoying them. Great adventure comics. If you're like into like Indiana Jones or I don't know, like National Treasure, like those kinds of like historical based fun stories with adventures, you can read those. Cats of the Louvre. This is another Taiyo Matsumoto manga about cats living in the Louvre, as you can imagine. Usagi Yojimbo Saga 1, currently reading through that. I'll Give It My All Tomorrow. This is a manga about a middle-aged man. Finally, he's a procrastinator, as you can imagine from the title, but he's finally giving it a shot to become a mangaka after being kind of a lazy buffoon all his life. It's heartfelt, but it's got a lot of comedy to it, a lot of self-deprecation, kind of slice of life manga. Down here, I've got a few editions. These are actually my son's of the Mighty Marvel Masterworks paperbacks of Spider-Man. I was borrowing those because those are easier to take on the go to read as opposed to the Taschen book I have. You saw on an earlier shelf. This is a new edition. This is a Superman Pals Jimmy Olsen by Matt Fraction. I heard this was a really great run, 12-issue run, and it's supposed to be really funny. So I picked that up. I haven't read it yet. Usagi Volume 1 hardcover. That was the first book I ever showed on my library on the first episode. My son and I were currently reading that, so there's that. Supergirl Silver Age Omnibus Volume 1's there. This here is a large stack of, you see a giant hole in my shelf back there. Giant stack of Master of Kung Fu issues. I'm currently collecting this run to custom bind it. I love the idea of the classic comics with the yellowed paper. It gives it more of a pulp feel to it, of these great classic pulp stories of martial arts action. So I'm currently collecting all those. I don't have the whole set yet to custom bind, but I'm sure you'll see future videos on that too. And then I have some couple of zines here, Imperial Egg, and then Scarf are up there. Some more single issues. I don't collect a lot of single issues, but I am collecting the current Saga run. Pink Lemonade. I keep trying to tell everybody about this comic. Everyone go buy this comic. It's coming in trade paperback here this summer. I'm going to be touting this and talking about this constantly. So make sure you check that out. More Pink Lemonade. What's that? Pink Lemonade. And a Master Kung Fu issue. Now down here I have an Akira figure for my friend Tanner. You got me that. Akira Volume 4 is actually there. Invisibles by Grant Morrison Omnibus. I'm working my way through that. The Irredeemable Omnibus from Boom Studios. You can see it has totally fallen apart, and I don't know what to do with this thing. I read it and I love the comic, but I can't sell it, and I also can't throw it away. I don't know what to do with it now. I have some Nate Garcia comics. Nate Garcia, I've shown him on the channel before. He's a great, super young cartoonist. I think he's like 18 or 19. He does like these Treasury edition, Treasury sized kind of comics, but really incredible cartoon, especially for his age. That I need to show off more of his newer works on my channel too. And then I think last thing to show would be Bat Manga by Chip Kidd. Really a great document about the manga that had Batman in it in Japan, but also with a lot of ephemera and toys and some of the more licensed stuff that they did in Japan with the Batman character. Really a cool historical document. Well, that's it. Thank you for watching my library tour. I really appreciate it. Appreciate all the support and comments. Please give it a thumbs up. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with all your friends. I'll see you guys later.